Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
O thou most high. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio, and I'm honored again to be with all of you here in fellowship. And thank you for joining the live broadcast. I'm on with my good friend Rob Skiba again this evening as we continue our journey into the Book of Enoch, going chapter by chapter and verse by verse. Rob, are you there, brother?
I am here. How are you this evening, Zen?
Really good, man. Just I'm busy on trying to get this book finished and completed so I can get some ordered before the upcoming conference. And so I know you're probably busy on your, as far as your presentations and different things. And I know you're busy with your comic books. And so if you would give people an update on, all of what you've got going on as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. I've been really busy working on the comic book. Some idiot had this bright idea of numbering, stamping them, and signing all of them. Wow. I think we are up to about 350 out of 500. So,
Nice.
if people are interested, they can go to seedtheseries.com, and in the top menu there, you'll see a link at the top. Actually, I'll share it for those watching on YouTube here. At the top right of the screen, there's a little link there. It says store. If you click on that, it'll take you to the seed store. And no, you won't be buying fruit tree seeds or anything like that, but you will be getting stuff related to the forthcoming TV series Seed. And of course, the comic book's right at the top of the page. People can check that out. There's only going to be 500 of these. So, if you're interested, you might want to jump on it pretty quick because they're going fast. And really excited about that. And want to give a shout out and a huge thank you to all of our supporters, everybody that helped make this possible. We couldn't have done it without you. So thank you so much for that. And had some good stuff going on with the animated side of it. They did mocap last week and sent me some behind the scenes on that, so that's pretty exciting. So things are moving forward, man, keeping us very busy. And yes, looking forward to the conference at the end of this month. If you want to give everybody some details on that, I'm sure they would appreciate it.
Yes, and I do believe that if there are, I haven't talked to Joy in the past couple of days on the updates, but we were down to like 10, maybe 20 seats at the most with availability. And so if you are planning on coming, you should probably contact Joy very soon to find out what is yet still available. And I do believe that we are booking for the Georgia Guidestones trip on Friday. There's a second bus, and so once that one gets filled as well, we're cutting it off at that point. But it is the Sacred Word Revealed Conference. It's upcoming March 27th through 29th here in Atlanta, Georgia. And myself and Rob, my son, Gary Wayne, Dr. Stephen Pigeon, Yana and Stephen Ben-Noon, Nathan Reynolds, Laura Austin, and Dr. Joy Jeffries Pugh will all be there and presenting both days. And we do have a number of speakers, and unfortunately we have to keep the presentations down to an hour each, but hopefully in the interim, there will be plenty of opportunity for people to meet and speak and greet and, hang out. And definitely looking forward to sharing meal with everybody as well. And just getting to meet people face to face. That's always an enjoyable part of doing the conferences. And so, but would you like to tell people what you'll be speaking on with regard to, both days?
Well, I always struggle with that. I'm the kind of guy that actually did my homework in homeroom.
Yeah.
It's like
While they were doing roll call.
They're doing roll call. I'm like whipping out my homework. It was like right before class. So unfortunately, some habits are hard to break. But I got so much going on. I don't have time to like create anything new. So
Yeah, right.
it'll be some form of a repackaged. I always try to throw something new in there, obviously, to add a little bit to it. But it'll be declaring the end from the beginning is a big theme. So I think I'm going to do with only an hour. I got two presentations, an hour each. So it'll be a very high level. Look, here's the thing. I'm working on a TV series, right? So as a writer, I know, you do a lot of foreshadowing. You set stuff up in the first act that will have a payoff in the third act. Mm-hmm. And I believe our creator is the greatest storyteller of all time. And he has declared the end from the beginning. Yeah. And if we were to believe Isaiah 46:10, then that means he set up the characters and the situations in Genesis, Act 1, for a payoff in Revelation, Act 3. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to do a high level on that, cover cosmology, cover Nephilim, Nimrod, pretty much everything, but from a very high level overview, obviously, for the time consideration.
Awesome. What you just mentioned with regard of God knowing the end from the beginning, I was working on a particular chapter in this book, and it was talking about how the garments of power, the rod of wonder, and also the Miriam's well had all been created before the foundations of the world, and that they would be instrumental in the lives of the patriarchs and Israel as a nation. And one of the things that I just recently learned, and I had talked about I did a 3-part series on the prophecy of the 10 kings, and I'll be actually speaking on this at the conference as well. But the well that God had created for Hagar and Ishmael in order to sustain him, that this same well, known as Miriam's well, it was also where Eleazar was sent by Abraham and had met Rebekah and brought her back to be Isaac's bride. And also when Jacob was running from Esau and trying to elude him, and when he went down, he met at this same well and laid eyes and fell in love with Rachel at first sight. And then later, this was also the same place that when Moses was running from Pharaoh and had went east towards Midian, that he came to the same well and watered the flocks of Jethro's daughters and met Zipporah, who became his bride. And so all three of these star-crossed stories and of these powerful couples, and very instrumental in the story of the garments of power and the rod of wonder, they all came together in meaning and encounter there at this particular well. And so I thought that was interesting, and it's a story that you don't get from just reading the King James, but in reading some of the extra biblical ancient sources, you get further insight on these kind of things.
Yeah, that's awesome. I discovered something similar to that when I was looking into Shechem. And I'd come to believe that, now I know we have different opinions on where the Garden of Eden was located, but whether you're right or I'm right, at this point it doesn't really matter. Shechem is clearly an important place to God. Yeah. And how he set stuff. That's the first place that the house of Abraham actually owned, the plot of land. But that's where God stops Abraham. He leaves the Ur of the Chaldees, and he gets out there and he stops him at Shechem. And he says, "Okay, yeah, look around. This place is yours. And over and over and over again, you keep running into the Shechem thing. Like after Israel, the Exodus, they were told to go to Shechem and divide the tribes, half on Gerizim and half on Ebal, pronounce the blessings on Gerizim and the curses on Ebal, and like over and over and over again. The Shechem. I'll touch on that at the conference, but yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. Like, I mean, he he's the master storyteller, and
Absolutely.
he sets all these things up
Right.
right from the
Yeah.
start.
Along with what you were saying with regard to Shechem is that I also learned, well, this isn't recent, but with regard to Aseneth, who became the bride for Joseph, that Shechem was rightful as far as an inheritance given to Jacob, but it was rightfully passed on to Joseph as well, because Aseneth was the daughter of Hamor and Dinah, and God told Dinah to put her, to allow her to be adopted and to put her
Okay.
up for adoption,
Wait a
and
second.
she was, adopted by Potiphar, the high priest in Egypt, and so she was the one that when Jacob came to visit, and she didn't want to marry anybody, and then he said that he wouldn't marry anybody that was a worshiper of idols, but she was actually Hebrew, even though she was raised, like Moses in this Egyptian household, but she became Joseph's bride, and she was actually, the daughter of Dinah, which made them the perfect couple. And then when you read the story of Joseph and Aseneth in the extra biblical manuscripts, it's like my favorite love story, even more powerful than the Song of Solomon.
Wow. So, where is that? Where is that information? Where can that be found as far as what Aseneth comes from?
The Legends of the Jews, and also I believe in the Perkti Rabbi Eleazar and the Asiter, the Secret Book of Moses.
That's fascinating.
These things.
I don't want to derail the whole show on this, but you and I have certainly had our issues with Dante Fortson.
Yeah.
Lately, apparently, he's put me in his crosshairs and put out like 8 videos. Where he's coming after me on different things, and of course, he's gone down the whole Black Israel route. And as far as that goes, my opinion on it is that they very likely were. The Israelites probably were people of color, but to say that they are now is, I think, completely ludicrous. It's almost like you listen to these people, and if you live in America and you're black, then you're an Israelite. It's like, first of all, Romans 11 throws color out the window.
Right.
So whether you're a British Israeli guy that thinks all Israel is white, or you're a black Hebrew guy and you think all Israel is black, it's completely nullified by Romans chapter 11. You're grafted in no matter what color you are.
Right. Exactly.
But one of the things he was talking about was how, most people of color believe that Ham is the father of black people, and Japheth is the father of white people, and Shem is, Middle Eastern and possibly even Asian, which I think is ludicrous in and of itself also. No one is wife. Yeah, okay, they produce white people, they produce Asians, and, Middle Easterns and black people. No. I think that happened much, much later. I actually think Dr. Ken Johnson does a really good job of showing how that came about. He's got a book called Ancient Post-Flood History.
Right.
And, we know from the Table of Nations in Genesis chapter 10 where people end up. And, in God's sovereign wisdom, he has put certain foods and plants and whatnot in various climactic regions that will be beneficial to you so you can survive there. So if you end up in an equatorial region, guess what? He's got plants all over the place that will help you produce more melanin.
Right.
What's that going to do? It's going to make your skin darker and protect you from the harmful radiation of the sun.
Right.
And then you get to the Tower of Babel, and like Joshua says, there's something like 600,000 men, I think, at the time, and we know that they were split up into 70 different languages, 70 different people groups. So you figure there's 600,000 men. You may be in the ballpark of 2+ million, people, counting women and children and whatnot. So let's say 2 million people split up into 70. Well, now you have controlled breeding experiments, and I think God in his creative wisdom decided, people who might have a certain, let's say, facial features, they will all go into this group. And guess what? You're speaking Chinese. Oh, Okay, well, if you get people with similar features together in a controlled breeding environment, guess what you're going to do? You're going to reinforce those traits, you
Right.
know? And so now all of a sudden you've got this whole group of people that speak Asian languages that have different facial features than you and I have,
Hmm.
and people who end up migrating south, guess what? They're going to be eating plants. They're going to darken their skin. Cool. People go
Hmm.
north, guess what? They're going to become more pale. And
Right.
real
Right.
north, you're going to metabolize fat differently.
Hmm.
Like I say, look, if you want to understand how humans diversified into the various shapes and colors, just study dog breeding.
Uh-huh.
Basically, there's something like 350 different breeds of dogs that all started essentially with a wolf. And you got a
Uh-huh.
vast difference between a Chihuahua and a Great Dane.
Right.
You
Right.
know, that's some massive diversity, all from controlled breeding experiments.
Hmm.
you know. But Dante's out there saying, well, Shem married into Ham's line, and he brings up several examples. I'm like, okay, dude, you haven't read very much because, like my first Torah portion that I ever attended was the story where Joseph is sold into slavery. Well, that's
Uh-huh.
the same portion where it does. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the scripture kind of takes a little sidetrack, a little sidebar, and shows you what's going on with Judah and Tamar. And
Right.
Judah marries a Canaanite, has 3 sons, and then he
Yes.
tries to get this woman Tamar for his sons.
Right.
Of course, the first 2 die, and they had to wait for the youngest to grow older. And basically she's dissed, and so she dresses herself up like a prostitute and entices
Yes.
Judah. He sleeps with her, and then you get Perez and different people that are
Hmm.
in the ancestry of Yeshua. Well, in my first Torah portion, that was there. We were reading that story, and they were asking, well, Tamar, was she a Canaanite? And I was like, no way.
No, she's the
It's
daughter
like,
of Shem.
yeah, she was a Shemite. So
Yeah.
now, the reason I'm bringing this all up is because Dante did a whole thing on Asenath of being of Ham because she was in Egypt. But
Oh,
and I hadn't
really?
looked into this, that'd be good.
Yeah, he's wrong there too.
I'm acquiring ammo here, so
Yeah.
I might want to get those resources from you
Oh,
uh,
yeah. I'll absolutely provide them for you.
on the Asenath. But that makes sense that God will provide within what He said to do and what not to do. If He said don't marry a Canaanite,
Right.
well, it wouldn't make sense then that a Canaanite's going to end up in the lineage of Yeshua.
Exactly.
Ancestry,
Exactly.
you know.
Right. Yeah, and that's, that was the whole reason why he did not allow Tamar to be pregnant by them.
Hmm.
Hmm. And so, yeah, absolutely. And the same thing with, Esau being removed from the line and all that as well. And so, yeah, I cover a lot of this in this particular book. So, but yeah, we can move on and definitely we'll talk more about these things. And yeah, I'll provide you the sources but yeah, fascinating when you read and study, these extra biblical sources, what you learn about the end from the beginning and how it all comes together.
Hmm. Yeah, and how Father seeds these things, like, he sets stuff way in advance
Right.
so that, okay, when you end up down there, guess what? You're going to meet a woman who's been adopted into this family, but you're going to end up marrying her. So, I got you covered. He had that
Exactly.
all figured out
Right.
long before Joseph even ended there.
Right.
And this, I don't want to go down this route, but they're all talking about the 400-year prophecy that supposedly ended last year. I'm like, do you guys even read the scriptures? I mean, wow. I mean, it's not talking about 1619 for crying out loud.
Right, right. Yeah, this is during the Exodus.
Yeah, I mean, but that's one of those things too, like because Paul sets the guardrails. He says from the giving of the covenant of Abraham until the giving of the law at Mount Sinai is 430 years.
Hmm.
So he sets the guardrails. He says, okay, from here to here, that's 430 years. But I think it's basically a comma that throws everything off, like in King James, where it sounds like, if you just read it, that, well, Israel's going to be slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Well, no, nobody's even in Egypt until Joseph is sold into slavery 215 years after the covenant of Abraham.
Right.
And then everybody's basically ruling as regional governors, and they're in charge until a pharaoh finally arises that didn't remember Joseph. So now you've extended it to, at max, in my opinion, at max, you got maybe 80 to 100 years that the Israelites were actually slaves in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
But yet everybody teaches, the Jews were slaves and Israel was slaves in Egypt for 400 years.
Right.
So, this is why we're looking into this. Why, for the audience here,
Yes.
this is why we see value in looking at these other texts.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
we can take them as commentary, ancient commentary. I mean, who's going to be closest to the truth? Those who are, closest to the original source information, or people writing commentary 3,000 years after the event?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Let's see what they thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the closer you get to source, the more you seem to get extra detail. Even like reading the Targum, which is a whole nother thing, and a rabbit trail that my son will be bringing up, and he's going to be speaking about the word of the Lord and how all that was removed from the Targum numerous times, and share a lot of verses and passages that are, messianic and prophetic, and that cover in great detail his relationship with us, which is a whole, as I said, another rabbit trail, and one that he and I have covered in several hours of programming. So, but yeah,
That's
just
awesome.
like with the, the Book of Enoch, and I'll definitely be getting you one of these books when we connect here in Atlanta.
I'm just saying I'm not particularly worried about this coronavirus thing, but what is concerning me is how freaked out everybody around me is getting.
Right, right.
Everywhere,
Yeah.
people are flipping out. Like Costco shelves are empty.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's like whoa, crazy stuff. And Sheila said, we're, Agenda 21 and stuff like that. Well, I mean, they gotta get busy. Like 21's like next year.
Yes.
And interesting that we're going to the Georgia Guidestones as part of this conference, and the first commandment and stone on the Georgia Guidestone is maintain the world population at 500 million, which means like 7.5 billion of us got to die.
Right. In a servant class,
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then the others are having to do with taking over and not allowing natural childbirth, and controlling that in a lab as well. And so there's lots of things that they'd like to take over and control with regard to population and growth and all that. And one final comment with regard to what we're talking about with the coronavirus. I just recently had been watching on Netflix a show called Containment, which is based here in Atlanta, and it has to do with cordoning off a certain portion of Atlanta where an outbreak of some kind of disease, and people are bleeding out and hemorrhaging and dying, and it ends up, well, I don't want to give it away, but ends up being CDC, created, which is something that Dr. Joy had put out about how some individual at Harvard, that he was also caught being paid by the Chinese government and trying to deliver these vials of something to them. And it had something to do in connection with, some kind of bio hazardous disease or something of that nature. But they are definitely have been and are looking to create and to weaponize disease for use in driving agendas, and certainly that has been a history of it.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. There has been a history of it, and one of these days when I have time to do it, I'm going to put together some sort of presentation on that history and get people look, chemtrails, that whole thing. Most people aren't even aware of it. Number one. Number two, it's completely unregulated, so you have no idea who's up there doing what. And that being the case, do you really trust this government or any other government that's literally spraying stuff over your head every day? The people need to rise up and say, hey, this has to stop.
Right.
We need some regular. What are you putting in the sky?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and they always seem to do it right before the rains come. And in my opinion, the rains are bringing down these chemicals that they're spraying into the air, and then when it hits the ground, it vaporizes and becomes almost like a mist, and people are breathing these kind of things in and ended up sick, with sinus infections, pneumonia, and all kind of weird things. And the people that have really done where they've done chemical analysis on the chemtrails and the high levels of aluminum and barium and all these different heavy metals that are found, and they're testing snow and rain and other things, and there's a lot of people that have been speaking out about these things. But yeah, something's not right, and these things are completely unnatural and detrimental to people's health. All right, we'll be right back, everyone.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Sacred Word Revealed comes to Atlanta, Georgia on March 27th through 29th, 2020. Purposed to reveal end times mysteries, to prepare the final generation, we must don the full armor of God. Featuring Zen Garcia, Gary Wayne, Stephen and Yana Ben Noon, Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, Justin James Garcia, Dr. Joy Pugh, Rob Skiba, Laurel Austin, buy your tickets now at sacredwordrevealed.com.
Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
Besides, he had a prior claim upon the city. Shechem, son of Hamor, the master of the city, had given it to Dinah as a present, and the wife of Joseph, Asenath, being the daughter of Dinah, the city belonged to him by right. That's from the Legends of the Jews, but I'll definitely send you this information after. It also covers, just really quickly, in the very next line, it says, Adam's clothes Jacob had received from Esau. He had not taken them from his brother by force, but God had caused them to be given to him as a reward for his good deeds. And so, it was in the study of the garments of power and also of the rod of wonder that I came across just this very random passage, about Asenath and how she was the daughter of Dinah. And it goes into great detail also on how, she, when she was given up for adoption, Zuleika and Potiphar, which Zuleika was the woman that tried to seduce Joseph. And so all these stories are intriguing.
So was she the daughter? Was she the daughter of Dinah by way of the rape of Shechem?
Yes. Yes.
So, but was Shechem? He was a Canaanite, though, wasn't he?
I do believe so. Yeah. Well.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know who the Shechemites are actually, but Shechem, the son of Hamor.
That would be interesting.
But it was Hamor was the one that had raped Dinah, though, right? Yeah, he was the father. Yeah, Shechem was the father that met with Jacob and agreed to have them circumcised, and then Simeon and Judah went in and slaughtered them all.
That would be an interesting study. You got me intrigued. I need something else to do.
Right. Yeah, another sidetrack, right? Yeah.
Well, if memory serves, last week the chapters were different. So we got as far as 50 in Lawrence, which was 51 in Charles.
Right.
So I guess I'll be picking up in 51 in Lawrence, and you'll be in 52 in Charles, I guess?
Yeah, 52.
Okay. All right. I'm ready if you are.
I am.
All right.
After you, brother.
There we go. 50 is L, right? L-I. Yeah. Roman numeral.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. After that period, in the place where I had seen every secret sight, I was snatched up in a whirlwind and carried off westwards. There my eyes beheld the secrets of heaven and all which existed on earth, a mountain of iron, a mountain of copper, a mountain of silver, a mountain of gold, a mountain of fluid metal, and a mountain of lead. And I inquired of the angel who went with me, saying, What are these things which in secret I behold? He said, All these things which thou beholdest shall be for the dominion of the Messiah, that he may command and be powerful upon earth. And the angel of peace answered me, saying, Wait but a short time, and thou shalt understand, and every secret thing shall be revealed to thee, which the Lord of spirits has decreed. Those mountains which thou hast seen, the mountain of iron, the mountain of copper, the mountain of silver, the mountain of gold, the mountain of fluid metal, and the mountain of lead, all these in the presence of the elect one shall be like a honeycomb before the fire, and like water descending from above upon these mountains, and shall become debilitated before his feet. In those days men shall not be saved by gold and by silver, nor shall they have it in their power to secure themselves and to fly. Interesting. There shall be neither iron for war, nor a coat of mail for the breast. Copper shall be useless also that which neither rusts nor consumes away, and lead shall not be coveted. All these things shall be rejected and perish from off the earth when the elect one shall appear in the presence of the Lord of spirits.
Intriguing.
Yeah.
All right, 52. And after those days in that place where I had seen all the visions of that which is hidden, for I had been carried off in a whirlwind, and they had borne me towards the west. There mine eyes saw all the secret things of heaven, that shall be a mountain of iron, a mountain of copper, a mountain of silver, and a mountain of gold, and a mountain of soft metal, and a mountain of lead. And I asked the angel who went with me, saying, what things are these which I have seen in secret? And he said unto me, all these things which thou hast seen shall serve the dominion of his anointed, that he may be potent and mighty on the earth. And that angel of peace answered, saying unto me, wait a little, and there shall be revealed unto thee all the secret things which surround the Lord of spirits. And these mountains which thine eyes have seen, the mountain of iron, and the mountain of copper, the mountain of silver, the mountain of gold, the mountain of soft metal, and the mountain of lead, all these shall be in the presence of the elect one, as wax before the fire, and like the water which streams down from above upon those mountains, and they shall become powerless before his feet. And it shall come to pass in those days that none shall be saved, either by gold or by silver, and none be able to escape. And there shall be no iron for war, nor shall one clothe oneself with a breastplate. Bronze shall be of no service, and tin shall be of no service, and shall not be esteemed, and lead shall not be desired. And all these things shall be denied and destroyed from the surface of the earth, when the elect one shall appear before the face of the Lord of spirits.
So basically, metals are becoming useless when Messiah comes. Yeah, that puts a different spin on. People are throwing their gold and silver in the streets like
Right.
It's worthless.
Yes. Well, the way that they have established the economy, and like when you read the first book of Adam and Eve and some of the primary Adamic literature, it speaks about how it was the children of Cain, because they are not able to till the land or to bring forth crops, that they established weights and measures. And building cities, they brought together the people in congregations like that. And then they also established tabernacles and alcoholic taverns and drinks, and also bands, as far as music, and also the brothels and the prostitutes and all of that. They created all of that, and Satan had guided them and led them into doing those kind of things. And they established commerce and became wealthy and rich by doing so. They are the money changers, exchangers, and the bankers, even in this day and age.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting that this is brought up because metal is either typically precious metals used for some form of currency, or typically weapons of warfare.
Right.
And so it's like in Messiah's economy, both are wiped out.
Yes, they're unnecessary, because we'll be living in a time where every need will be taken care of. There will be no scarcity, and people will be using their talent as a means of exchange. And there will be no lack, because every child will be taken care of, raised, and with proper nourishment, and in an environment where you don't have to worry about having weapons or breastplates or shields or things of that nature for protection, because there will be no war, there will be no attacks and no enemy. Everything will be instead of, based upon hate and conflict and enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, there will be peace and justice, the rule of law, and harmony, which, will be just an amazing thing, really.
Mm-hmm. So I see people are already starting to talk about this in the chat room, but this was something that occurred to me also as worth talking about here. Who is this elect one? Who is this Messiah? Now, there are anti-Yeshua Jesus deniers out there who want to say it's David. And I'm like, well, then what do you do with all the scriptures that talk about the branch that's coming out of David?
Right, yes.
That it's going to be an offspring of David, the son of David.
The stem of Jesse, right.
That's going to, although it does talk about David coming back. So, I've always been intrigued by that. But there's definitely a parallel worthy of note. Let's put it that way. That David's coming back and he's got a function, but yet we also have this Yeshua character that we have to deal with. Mm-hmm. That these people that want to deny Yeshua and write the whole thing off, I'm like, you have to ignore. Like when people will talk about the Sethite theory, I'm like, you have to ignore a mountain of worldwide information in order to believe the Sethite theory.
Right.
You have to ignore an even bigger mountain to try to dismiss Yeshua. I mean,
right. There's so much. So much.
Yeah. So, I mean, and David, David didn't rise from the dead.
Right. No.
A worldwide movement wasn't based around David.
Right.
David can't die for my sins.
Exactly.
He never claimed to be God.
Right.
This character here, this elect one, is clearly there, from the time of Enoch at least, but we see that he was there from the beginning.
Yes.
David wasn't there from the beginning.
Right. And, Yahushua was recognized by the devils, the demons, as the Son of God and as their judge and tormentor. I mean, while the rest of the Israelites were confused, or some portion of them, at least the children of Cain, the Pharisees that had denied him and were conspiring and seeking his murder, but certainly the devils recognized him as the one who would torment them at the end of days when their time was up. So they know. In ancient rabbinic commentary, you see that there was an understanding of, effectively, they didn't know if it was one person or two. You had Messiah ben Joseph, the suffering servant, that they clearly saw throughout the scriptures, and Messiah ben David, the conquering king. Uh-huh. Like they saw both, Mm-hmm. In fact, going back to my first Torah portion that I ever did, the person that facilitated that, and I'd never done this before. I was aware, certainly, I was aware of the parallels between the life of Joseph and the life of Yeshua. But I never really sat down and intentionally made a comparison chart. And this person said, draw a line down the center of your page. And we all had like notebook paper. And then at the top on the left, put Joseph, and on the top at the right, put Yeshua or Jesus. And write down as many parallels as you can think of between the two. And just off the top of my head, I had 25, just quickly, Mm-hmm. And, many of the people had a lot of the same ones I did, but some had other ones. And I think collectively in our group, we had something like 50 parallels. And I was like, wow. And then we went through and started breaking them down, like showing, what's what and everything. And of course, we have David showing up, centuries later. Then David dies, so Joseph's long gone, David's long gone, and then we have this prophet Isaiah showing up and saying, hey, a child's going to be born, and by the way, he's going to be known as the everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, King of Kings, Right. And this child, born of a virgin, and people want to say, it's just a young baby. Well, when they made the Septuagint, they knew the difference. They used the word in the Septuagint that means virgin, mm-hmm. not just young lady. Now, typically, if you were a young lady
that was not married and had sex, you get stoned to death. So there weren't a whole lot of and what if God Himself is giving this prophecy. He's like, I'm going to give you a sign. Behold, a virgin is going to conceive. Okay, now if it just meant young virgin or young woman, just young woman, young maiden, what kind of sign is that?
Exactly.
That happens all the time.
Right.
So who is this child born of a virgin, confirmed by the Septuagint translation? This is a virgin now, who the government's going to be on his shoulders. He's going to be called Everlasting Father. Everlasting. Is David the Everlasting Father? No. Is Hezekiah? People who want to deny Yeshua say, well, that prophecy was just, it was a prophecy important to Ahaz, and it was Hezekiah. And it's like, well, he doesn't fit any of these descriptions, and as a righteous man, he would have denied all of those things. Mm-hmm. Don't call me that. That's blasphemy. And then you get to Isaiah 53, and like, what do you do with that?
There's no getting around it.
Right. Now David prophesies in Psalm 22, talk about the dogs of Bashan have encompassed me, and they pierced my hands and feet. Now, he's waxing poetic, but yet somebody showed up,
exactly,
who fit those descriptions perfectly. And had his hands and feet pierced.
Right. Yeah, and again, with regard to the Aramaic translation of the Targum, there are many. I believe there's 60 that are, specific again to the word of the Lord in the Psalms, which have that wording, the word of the Lord, and the association to Christ within them removed. So all of those are also provided in this book that my son did, the Word of the Lord, a comparative analysis of the hidden memra. And so, David wrote numerous times messianic prophecies, not just those, but others as well. That
the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, and what have you. So do you think that there's like a co-rulership? Because we see that David does rule. I'm trying to think, I can't off the top of my head, forgive me, but I don't remember the exact prophetic scriptures talking about David ruling again. Do you think there's like coming a time with a co-rulership here on earth where Yeshua is ruling and reigning alongside David, maybe as a co-ruler?
No. In my opinion, it is the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit that rule, and the only co-ruler would be them, because we're moving into an eternal kingdom where we know and God is with us, that, and there's no longer to be a human ruler sitting on the throne. I think all that will be done away with, and we will know why we have to have God as sovereign ruler as well, because in this time and in this space, the duality that we've learned from having free will, we learned that human rulers and also angelic, the fallen ones, that we fell short, and we given free will to do as we wish and to create a world that we, as doing what we wish, that we would create chaos, and essentially we would annihilate ourselves out of existence. And so God has allowed this experiment, so to speak, to show us why we need Him as sovereign Lord, and why God has to be the sole monarch, but the Trinity ruling. But yeah, I believe that the as far as the Game of Thrones, the Reign of Kings, as far as human, all that will be over as we move into the millennial age.
Yeah, I'd have to go back, and it's been a long time since I looked at that and look at the prophetic scriptures about David in an end time context. Because I could see certainly, Yeshua being the King of Kings.
Yes.
Well, then you'd have other kings. Like, in other words, even an example of Moses, was it Jethro? I think he's like, dude, you can't handle all these people. You need to divide up.
Right. Yes.
Set up some, local
Leaders of
governors,
leaders. Yeah.
leaders of leaders.
Yeah.
And so for that to, be in effect, I can see, maybe there could be, a king of kings type of scenario where he's the ultimate king, but he's divided up,
Absolutely.
regions under leadership.
Yeah, I do absolutely agree with that. And in fact, he does state, how even some would judge the angels. And so even when the judgment comes forth, and every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that there is assembly of jurors, like, that some of the patriarchs and the prophets of old, that they will sit in jury then even with him in judging the angels and judging others. And so, yeah, God will rule in administration. And I definitely think that the saints, the apostles, the patriarchs, that we recognize as being, the strong leaders of Israel, that they will be special in that administration of God, and that they will, have special roles, special assignment. But certainly, Yahushua, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, they will be ultimate rule, because they are the only God. They are the pre-existent one. And so,
yeah. Well, that's all I had on that particular chapter. Is there anything else you were thinking about?
No, I think that's good. Let's move forward.
Okie dokie. Let me switch over here to 52 in the Lawrence translation. There my eyes beheld a deep valley, and wide was its entrance. All who dwell on land, on the sea, and in islands shall bring to it gifts, presents, and offerings. Yet that deep valley shall not be full. Their hands shall commit iniquity. Whatsoever they produce by labor, the sinners shall devour with crime. But they shall perish. I guess that's what it says, front the face of the earth, probably from the face of the Lord of spirits and from the face of his earth. They shall stand up and shall not fail forever and ever. I beheld the angels of punishment who were dwelling there and preparing every instrument of Satan. Then I inquired of the angel of peace who proceeded with me, for whom those instruments were preparing. He said, these they are preparing for the kings and powerful ones of the earth, and thus they may perish. After which the righteous and chosen house of his congregation shall appear, thenceforth unchangeable in the name of the Lord of spirits. Nor shall those mountains exist in his presence, as the earth and the hills, as the fountains of water exist. And the righteous shall be relieved from the vexation of sinners.
All right, 53. There mine eyes saw a deep valley with open mouths, and all who dwell on the earth and the sea and islands shall bring him gifts and presents and tokens of homage. But that deep valley shall not become full. And their hands commit lawless deeds, and the sinners devour all whom they lawlessly oppress. Yet the sinners shall be destroyed before the face of the Lord of spirits, and they shall be banished from off the face of his earth, and they shall perish forever and ever. For I saw all the angels of punishment abiding there, and preparing all the instruments of Satan. And I asked the angel of peace who went with me, for whom are they preparing these instruments? And he said unto me, they prepare these for the kings and the mighty of this earth, that they may thereby be destroyed. And after this the righteous and elect one shall cause the house of his congregation to appear. Henceforth they shall be no more hindered in the name of the Lord of spirits. And these mountains shall not stand as the earth before his righteous, but the hills shall be as a fountain of water, and the righteous shall have rest from the oppression of sinners.
This is a rather cryptic passage here. Deep valley with open mouths, and all who dwell on the earth and sea islands shall bring to him gifts and presents and tokens of homage, but that deep valley shall not become full. What's your take on that?
I think it has something to do with, how it speaks about in Isaiah 14 as well, about prepare slaughter for his children, because the kings, they are the bloodline of Satan, the seed of the serpent, and it mentions there, about the seed of the evildoers. Anyways, we'll pick it up on the other side. Be right back, everyone.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Everyday questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses?
Which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible.
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Sacred Word Revealed comes to Atlanta, Georgia on March 27th through 29th, 2020. Purposed to reveal end times mysteries, to prepare the final generation, we must don the full armor of God. Featuring Zen Garcia, Gary Wayne, Stephen and Yana Ben Noon, Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, Justin James Garcia, Dr. Joy Pugh, Rob Skiba, Laurel Austin, buy your tickets now at sacredwordrevealed.com.
Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
That did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of his prisoners? All the kings of the nations, even all of them, lie in glory, every one in his own house. But thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch, and as the raiment of those that are slain, thrust through with a sword that go down to the stones of the pit, as a carcass trodden under feet. Um, again, with regard to, it seems that the kings, they are punished uh, extremely because of their slaughter of the innocents, and I believe their pursuit of unjust and the creation of unnecessary war. And certainly that we see even in this day and age, with the war of terror and on terror, that Iraq being targeted, and I think for purpose other than, what we were told, the whole thing of weapons of mass destruction and got to remove Saddam Hussein, even the oil that we talked about, the grave of Gilgamesh being there discovered, and the focus on the museums and how they had stolen all of these ancient artifacts, priceless. I mean, because those kind of things, you don't run across or discover them. Even though I believe there's still a lot of ancient cities that are undiscovered and lie dormant, even at the bottoms of oceans and deep Amazon forests and things of that nature, and that even in plain sight, right there outside of those huge towns in Bosnia, you have these massive pyramid structures and complexes so ancient and so old that the growth had covered them up in plain sight. I mean, things like that, there's new discoveries every day, but certainly those kind of things are priceless when it comes to especially what we know now of the fallen angels, and they're having higher capacity, higher technology, and that even the structures they created were built in a manner that we cannot replicate today. So.
Oh yeah, you've been out in California, out in the LA area. There's like these. The first time I ever went out there, I was struck by the appearance of the mountains that are all like around the highways and stuff. They call it the City of Angels. And the mountains, to me, look like somebody took a really huge dump truck and just buried pyramids, because they all had this very pyramidal, like kind of a cone shape to them. As I'm driving around, like I can't remember the exact highways, 101 maybe, I don't know, all in that area, and I'm looking at them, I'm like, man, I wonder if anybody's ever thought of digging into those things.
Right.
They look to me like rubble burying some kind of structure.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, to your point, I think there's cities like and things like that all over the world.
All over, exactly. Even like some of the ancient names for the topography there in the Grand Canyon, and how Kincaid was supposedly had discovered this ancient
Egyptians.
Yeah, the Egyptians and different structures there in Egypt, and how they have names like the Temple of Isis and things of that nature, and they look like, if you dug into them, you would discover, somewhere in the core what would be pyramidal type structures, all these 90-degree angles, and what seems to look like on the outside, just like Indiana Jones, these temple complexes that are just overgrowth, and buried in who knows whether it was the flood of Noah's day or whatever, that somehow quickly they became submerged and covered over, and but they still have that facade of looking like these ancient bastions of where in the high places, Satan was always worshipped in the high places and on the tops of mountains and temples and things like that. And so, yeah, I think that even with, you were talking about Los Angeles, there's an ancient account that the natives talk about how there was a city, an underground city of lizard people,
Yeah.
the reptilians that lived there, and how even when they were building the highway and infrastructure of Los Angeles, that they had breached and had weird encounters with these types of beings and this kind of the discovery. And somebody had known who was involved in the establishment of Los Angeles as a city, these ancient tunnels to get into these deep underground city complexes, and that there was, they were already building on top of something that was highly sophisticated. And it seems to be that way. We were talking about in previous shows the mud floods and how all that, the Tartarian architecture of the giants, and how all that stuff is coming out, these star forts, and how it seems that a lot of these ancient cities, even the modern cities, that they seem to be already built up structures that were in place, and that a lot of even what becomes the capitals of all the different towns and cities across even America, how they were all built in similar architecture and style, and that they may have pre-existed even, the coming of modern Americans and the Pilgrims and all that, that these buildings were already here and spread across the world in some form and fashion, the Tartarian Empire. And the maps seem to also assert this as well.
Well, yeah, and have you seen the maps that California used to be an island?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And this was not long ago. I mean, we're talking about the late 1600s. California was an island and was not even connected to the continental United States. And they also seem to show that, the Great Lakes weren't in place at that time either. That they did not, really? They did not exist. Yeah, the Great Lakes, and also the structure of, as far as the Grand Canyon as we know it, that wasn't in place either. So definitely weird anomalies. And the suggestion is that there have been cataclysms that have occurred in recent times that have led to great changes in the topography, and as well as the ocean levels across the world. And so, yeah, definitely something to consider.
Yeah, maybe just a slight rabbit trail, but I'd seen, I'm trying to get caught up in watching the Isaiah 46:10 conference. I think it was just the last weekend.
Right.
And I'm intrigued. Steve Lutria has I can come to a new take on end times. And, we've had our disagreements, certainly, as to how to interpret, events of the last days and stuff like that. But I'm intrigued by some of the things that he's talking about, and wanting to look into that a little bit more. I'm not quite sure why I brought that up. You said something, I just lost my train of thought on that. But
yeah, we were talking about Tartaria and the maps and all that. I don't know if that triggered anything.
Something. Yeah.
I'm not sure who he is, so I'm not familiar with his work.
He used to be part of 119 Ministries.
Oh, okay.
He went on. He went solo a few years ago. But yeah, I guess maybe just to say that I'm rethinking a lot of things.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we go to churches that preach a certain dogma, and we become convinced that that's it until you get out on your own and start reading on your own, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's not quite right. That's not quite right. And history itself may be completely jacked up. And if some of these events like, I mean, if California used to be an island and the Great Lakes didn't used to be there, then we're talking, like you said, pretty major catastrophic events in very recent times.
Right.
I mean, we're only talking just a few hundred years.
Yeah, the 1800s seemingly.
Yeah,
That's what it's
17,
pointing to.
1800s.
Yeah. And major cataclysms ongoing, not just
The mud flood thing is very,
yeah, that's
very
absolutely
intriguing.
fascinating, right?
Yeah. What's your take on the instruments of Satan in verse 3?
I was wondering if that was like, the instruments of torture and what they would put the kings through. Because, like, when you read the Apocalypse of Peter, and also the Vision of Paul, in describing Sheol and the wicked being located there, it speaks about how these angels of fire, they punish the residents there, the wicked, for the things that they did, and depending on what sin that they underwent a certain type of punishment, and there always seems to be instruments of torture included in some manner within that punishment. And it makes you wonder about like the kings and the torture, and also the Catholic Church and the trials.
Inquisition.
Yeah, the Inquisition, and even the witch trials that went on even long before then, and how they tortured all these women, and so those kind of things. It makes me wonder as to if they will have to you reap what you sow, type of thing, with regard to all the people they tortured.
Well, yeah, Scripture says that the lake of fire was prepared for the devil and his angels.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was never meant for us. It was
Right,
prepared
right. For
them.
humanity at all, yeah.
And so, Hasatan is not a name. It's a
Title. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a title, the accuser. So, if I'm looking at verse 3, and I saw the angels of punishment abiding there and preparing all the instruments of the accuser.
Mm-hmm.
But there are many Satans. They're not just,
right.
That takes some unpacking right there. But,
mm-hmm.
We tend to create this caricature. This, Lucifer, that word wasn't even in Scripture. I mean, that was a footnote that, made its way into Scripture much later. So, I mean, we have Samael and various other names that are given as proper names for the character in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
But we see that there are many Satans. There are, accusers. I mean, a Satan is just an accuser.
Right.
Of course, we know of one that is identified as the accuser of the brethren.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, so I struggle with wondering whether in a passage such as this we're talking about a specific entity or just a description.
Right. And I think really that it's kind of legion. That legion represents, that we are many. But I certainly do believe that there is a one, because even in Luke chapter 10, verse 18, Yeshua speaks about seeing Satan fall as lightning from the heavens. And so and then in the passage in 2nd Enoch, where it speaks about one from the order of the angels that, turned and rebelled against them, and that this one, as it says in Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, where iniquity was found within him, it's speaking about this king of Tartarus and king of Babylon, but being specific to Satan, the adversary, that there is one, this Beliar, Samael, all these different names for this one particular being. And he was the first created archangel. Like in the Gospel of Bartholomew, Bartholomew is given and taken down in the Hades and hell is exposed, and he's allowed to ask Beliar, who is, he speaks of himself as being the first created archangel, even before Michael, Raphael, and Uriel, and he talks about, his rebellion and how iniquity was found within him and all these different things. And so that, in my opinion, shows and gives specificity to there being this one. But of course, those that rebelled with him, they are all counted as legion. We are many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I don't really have anything else on that. I did during the break, though, just sort of as a side note, look up the scripture. Actually, somebody posted it in the chat room, Jeremiah 39. But they shall serve the Lord their God and David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. So this is after David, talking in an end time context. And if people go like on BibleHub.com and look up Jeremiah 30 verse 9, I don't want to take up the whole show on this, but people can look up the commentary on that and why it's not specifically David. We see like a commentary on the Messiah from Jeremiah 23, 5 and 6, talking about a branch coming out of David.
Right.
I will raise up, unto David a righteous branch.
Mm-hmm.
And just, there's lots of commentary on this stuff. So this is a study I did a long time ago. So I'm like reaching way back here, looking at this again. But it is kind of confusing because you do see prophetic scriptures about, David appearing to be ruling and reigning in the last days. But, it seems like as you break down the language used, and even the Targums it mentions in some of these things here, that's talking about a Messiah coming out of David.
Right.
That's why the ancient rabbinic, sources talk about a Messiah ben David, a son of David that would be the Messiah.
Well, again, it's my opinion that this is Yeshua, and that
agreed.
even the stem of Jesse, which we know Jesse was the father of David, and so that his royal bloodline, certainly I believe, and I covered this in a chapter in this new book on the stem of Jesse and how it is that I don't know if you ever read. I sent you the text on the priesthood of Jesus Christ, how it shows that Mary was a perpetual virgin and how they confirmed that she was both connected to the to Aaron, the high priest, the brother of Moshe, and then also to David, that she's connected to the royal bloodline of David as well, and that Yahushua as her son was confirmed to be, the Son of God, and also that it was in him that the priesthood and the kingship were reunited and brought together as one.
Well, that's why he's the Melchizedek.
Right. Exactly. Yes. That the order of the ancients was restored through him.
I do remember looking at that a while back. Of course, I had also had a fairly lengthy debate with Robert Sungenis, Dr. Sungenis, because he's like Captain Catholic. He is like the self-proclaimed Catholic apologist. That's his ministry. And he was desperately trying to convert me. I'm like, dude, do you even know who you're talking to? That's not gonna happen. But he was talking about the perpetual virginity issue. And so, what's your take then on the brothers of Jesus? I know the Catholic line is that Joseph had sons probably from a previous marriage or something before he took Mary to wife.
Right. Yeah. And actually, that is something that I cover in this chapter as well, that Joseph, he was already an elderly widowed man, and that he was 49 years married to his previous wife and had 6 children by them, 4 sons and 2 daughters. and that even his youngest children were, that became two of the closest apostles to Yahushua, Thomas and James, that they were his younger children, and that he even had grandchildren that were older um, than Mary, and so and she was 14 years old because that was the age that they left the temple, and the virgins would then court, and get married and then start to have families, but Mary had promised to be a perpetual virgin. She had made a vow that she would not ever know a man. And so Zacharias, her uncle, who was the father of John the Baptist, he prayed, and he was told to have all of the tribe of Judah, all the unmarried men and widowed men, to bring forth their staves, and there would be a supernatural sign, which was also, where it says the Isaiah 11, where a branch out of the stem of Jesse, that there would be the supernatural sign. And what happened was that when they brought forth their staves, Joseph, when the high priest gave Joseph his staff, a rose bloom budded out of the end, and then a dove landed on the end of his staff. And he was shown in the sight of all Israel that he would be the caretaker and the guardian for Mary. And he was already elderly, which is why when Yahushua was crucified, he was
he's already
already
gone.
dead. Yeah,
Gone.
he had already passed away. And that's why John, uh, Christ says, John, your mother, mom, your son, and basically placed her into his care. And so, and that's also why, in this particular text on the priesthood of Christ, it confirms, and also in the infancy gospels and narratives, that Salome, who was Mary's cousin, she was also a midwife, that they could not believe that, she was a virgin, and that she was conceiving a child. And they checked in whatever way they checked, and they affirmed her virginity. And then also the priests, they called forth the midwives when they had to, because they were deliberating. They actually had this whole codex where they were there were 22 priests that were kept in a line, and that Yahushua was brought in for consideration into this particular line of priests, he was part of this order. And they affirmed Mary as being his mother and her being a virgin, and that they had to declare that Yahushua was the Son of God. And so they affirmed all these things in this particular codex. And this high level rabbi, he was telling one of his friends who was a Christian and was trying to convert him that he knew without question that Jesus was the Messiah, that they had affirmed it. And then he told them this whole story about how they, affirmed Mary, and that when they wanted to bring Christ into being part of this priesthood, because, he did read the scroll of Isaiah in front of in the temple to all those that were there gathered for this teaching. And so he was part of that order and had been brought into that order. In fact, he was the last one to be entered, because after that, the temple was destroyed and everything, and they were exiled into different places. But that particular text tells this really incredible story, this ancient account of how they affirmed all these things. And the rabbis and the Jews and the Hebrew people, the Israelites, knew without question, but they hid it. They hid it and they kept it from their people. And that this confusion exists and is ongoing even into this day. But without a doubt, they knew even back then And so I do recommend people check this out. But even this particular text, we made it part of the release of my son's book, so it's available in there for people that are interested in reading. You might be able to find it online. I didn't look, really extremely hard, but people might be able to find it. It's called On the Priesthood of Jesus Christ.
That's fascinating. Boy, you can imagine the amount of tap dancing they had to have been doing for 40 years up until the destruction of the temple, because you also have all the stories about, the ribbon, when it kept, every time they cast lots, it kept coming up for Azazel.
Right.
I think it was for Azazel. Was it for Azazel?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
But when they'd send the goat out, the goat would come back, and like
Right.
the ribbon wouldn't turn. Though my sins be as scarlet, there was way to white as snow. Like the gates kept opening at night.
Right. All right, we'll be right back, everyone.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses?
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible.
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Sacred Word Revealed comes to Atlanta, Georgia on March 27th through 29th, 2020. Purposed to reveal end times mysteries, to prepare the final generation, we must don the full armor of God. Featuring Zen Garcia, Gary Wayne, Stephen and Yana Ben Noon, Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, Justin James Garcia, Dr. Joy Pugh, Rob Skiba, Laurel Austin, buy your tickets now at sacredwordrevealed.com.
Hello friends, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
The Virgin Mary, while taking heart, hesitated, tilted her head, and her eyes filled with tears, said to them, I have given birth to Jesus, this I know, just as you yourselves already acknowledge, but I do not know a man. As natural proof of this, I offer the seal of my virginity. Upon hearing this, and at a loss and in a state of confusion, they were reduced to utter paralysis. Then, after recovering themselves, they said to her, It is not possible for us, nor is it without risk, to register in the divine codex the child born from you in violation of accepted practice, unless you reveal his father as well, so that we might persuade you by our action here. The codex is set before you as proof. Examine it, and you will see how, based on ancient custom, each priest reports his patronymic and tribal lineage from Levi. So do not hinder us and your son as well regarding the question under consideration and what by mutual agreement we have resolved to do about him. Holding fast once more to her words, she said, As I have said, I do not know a man. Do what you deem right. And then, after deliberating amongst themselves at length, they fetched midwives, and after conducting every test and careful examination, they found that she truly was a virgin. And as they were no longer able to resist her on the grounds that she was not the mother of Jesus, because of the oath they swore to the law and their promise, they interrogated the neighbors and the family, secretly believing that they would find some outsiders to discredit her maternity. But quite the opposite. They found everyone of one accord in confirming that not only did Mary give birth to Jesus at that time, but that the infant appeared fully formed, as it were 2 years of age. All those who saw the newborn child thus were beside themselves, saying, This infant was born for the salvation of Israel. Then, defeated on all sides, and in a real dilemma, they then became by necessity even more cautious. And they brought Mary and said to her, See, we have conducted every test and discovered things just as you said. But because it is necessary for us to register him after hearing from your living voice, we adjure you by the Almighty God to tell us truthfully who is the father of your son, Jesus, whom we are required to register in the codex set before your eyes. And she, filled by the Holy Spirit, answered them, In the words of God, I say that it is none other than the God whom, in a prophetic way, you have just invoked under oath. And thereupon she began to explain to them the vision of Gabriel and the assurance that Joseph received from the angel and her own response to that angel. And when they heard this, they were struck with fear and awe, and immediately brought Jesus and led him up to the temple. And they appointed him priest, enrolling him in the codex in the customary way, as follows. On this month and in this indiction, by unanimous vote, we have appointed as priest Jesus, the Son of God, and the Virgin Mary, on the priesthood of Jesus Christ. And so,
is that the name of the is that the name of the text, or is that
that's the name of the text, on the priesthood of Jesus Christ.
Well,
yes.
How far does that date back to?
It dates all the way back to Theophilus, who was, the
guy Luke wrote to.
Yeah, Theophilus. He was one of the rabbis that, we're talking first century. And so, and he was alive during that time, and he affirms the existence of this codex, and that the Jews knew without a doubt that Christ was the Son of God, and that his mother, the perpetual Virgin Mary, that she did immaculately conceive him.
That's fascinating.
It's an absolutely fascinating text.
While you were, during the break, I looked up just some of the stuff leading up to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty crazy time. So, if you got what you're talking about going around, they're talking about that. And then, of course, that the temple veil was torn in two in Mark
Right.
15:38. And I'll
Right.
just read a little bit from this here. It says, when the temple veil was rent in two, it exposed the fact that the empty, vain worship that had been going on for 400 years, the Holy of Holies was empty because the Ark of the Covenant wasn't there.
Uh-huh.
The presence of Yahweh no longer resided in the temple, but in the body of Christ, and redeemed people of every nation. We talked whoever this person is, talked last week about the scapegoat. And I'll just say, it is the ritual of the Day of Atonement that is one of the biggest validations of the Book of Enoch.
Uh-huh. Right.
King James just says scapegoat,
Yes.
but you look it up in Hebrew, they're casting lots, one for Yod-Heh Vav-Heh and one for Azazel, a
Right.
proper name. And without the Book of Enoch, you have no frame of reference for that at all. Enoch tells you that Raphael was to bind Azazel and Dudiel. We read that a few weeks back, and that all sin was to be ascribed to Azazel.
Right.
So that's why. I mean, the entire ritual of the Day of Atonement makes no sense at all without the Book of Enoch.
Right.
So that's one of the big things I always say about that. It says, according to the Mishnah, the early rabbinic interpretation of the biblical commandment, the high priest divided a thread of crimson wool, tied one half to the temple door and the other half to the horn of the scapegoat itself. They say that the scarlet thread on the temple door would turn white, which was to indicate that their sins were forgiven. So if I think it was the white, they had a white stone and a black stone, and I think it was the white stone in the right hand or something, it was for Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. If it was the black stone in the left hand, it was to Azazel. So we have the scripture, was it Isaiah 1:18, though my sins be as scarlet, they're made white as snow. That's another reference. So now you have Isaiah also endorsing this whole thing.
Yes. Yes.
It says the Talmud records 4 ominous events that took place 40 years before the temple's destruction. Again, for the Yeshua Jesus deniers out there, how do you explain this? It's like, these are Jews now telling you all kinds of weird stuff that happened for 40 years leading up to the destruction of the temple. And the temple was 70 AD. Back off 40 years. What do you get?
Yes, exactly.
You're
Right.
30 AD. Guess what? There's an individual. Just so happens, something happened to this guy, 40
Right.
years prior. It says, 1, the lot for Yahweh's goat would always come up in the left hand. They thought it was a good sign if it came up in the right hand. 2, the scarlet thread on the temple door stopped turning white. 3, the westernmost light on the temple menorah would not stay lit. The temple doors would open by themselves. We read in the Jerusalem Talmud, 40 years before the destruction of the temple, the western light went out. The crimson thread remained crimson, and the lot for the Lord always came up in the left hand. They would close the gates of the temple by night and get up in the morning and find them wide open. This is and then in the Babylonian Talmud, it states, our rabbis taught during the last 40 years before the destruction of the temple, the lot for the Lord did not come up in the right hand, nor did the crimson colored strap become white, nor did the westernmost light shine, and the doors of the Hekal, the temple, would open by themselves. Since both Talmuds recount the same information, this indicates the knowledge of these events was accepted by the widespread Jewish community. The first of these miracles concerns a random choosing of the lot, which was cast on the Day of Atonement. The lot chosen determined which of the 2 goats would be for the Lord and which goat would be for the Azazel, or the scapegoat. During the 200 years before 30 CE, when the high priest picked one of the 2 stones, and each year the priest would select a black stone as often as a white stone, but for 40 years in a row, beginning in 30 CE, the high priest always picked the black stone. The odds against this happening are astronomical, over 1 trillion to 1. The lot for Azazel, the black stone, contrary to all the laws of science, came up 40 times in a row, from 30 AD to 70 AD, and was considered a dire event and signified something bad fundamentally changed in this Yom Kippur ritual. Yeah, there's a lot more you can read on it, but I always found that fascinating. And it's like, come on, I mean, how much proof do you need?
Right.
I mean, you have Jewish rabbi commentators saying, all this weird stuff happened for these 40 years. Clearly something had changed.
Yes, exactly.
There, right. And then you add all of the testimony that you were talking about. Meanwhile, elsewhere, they're convening and doing these examinations, if you will, to determine certain things about Mary. pretty compelling evidence, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's undeniable. And that's, that's the other thing that just makes the story as well, when you examine it, undeniable, is how much the divine hand of God is upon the events and orchestrating them in this manner. Even, again, with the conception, the immaculate conception and the perpetual virginity of Mary, these are supernatural signs. As you said, a virgin shall conceive, that shall be a sign. And that was, and for these, all the Pharisees and all the Jewish leaders and that were part of the examination of Mary, they should know without a doubt that is the sign. That's the prophetic fulfillment of Isaiah right there. And that without a doubt, Yahushua is Savior Messiah. They should know without a doubt. And this text confirms they did know and they accepted. Theophilus, without a doubt, knew and even bragged to his Christian friend that, they knew, but because of their traditions, and he describes at the beginning of this text that the reason he's not a Christian is because of all of the traditions and the luxuries and the benefits that he, as a elder of the rabbinic priesthood, that he gets to enjoy. And so he doesn't want to be a Christian. He talks about, why would he? And that they knew without a doubt. And so, yeah, I recommend people read this text in its entirety. And I did send it to you, so it's in your email.
I remember looking at it a while back. Just so people are, people always freak out. I'm not endorsing the Talmud. Okay.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I agree. There's lots of crap in the Talmud. And I've never
of course. Yeah.
I've really never, honestly, I've never read Kabbalah. I've never read the Talmud, the Zohar. I've never read any of those. I've certainly read about them and read quotes from them, but I've never read any of those things. But I've read enough about them to know there's not much in there that I'm going to endorse.
Right.
All my point in bringing it up is this is what they believed.
Yes.
This is what even they.
Right, even they, exactly. Even from their own text. It's like, when we talk about the New World Order, we read from the protocols or like the report from Iron Mountain. We're not endorsing what they say. We certainly are against it. However, we're sharing what they say in their own words, which is confirming what we're talking about, so.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was a heck of a rabbit trail.
Right.
The Book of Enoch. Shall we continue?
Yes, let's do.
Okay. Let's at 53 in the Lawrence. Then I looked and turned myself to another part of the earth, where I beheld a deep valley burning with fire. To this valley they brought monarchs and the mighty. And there my eyes beheld the instruments which they were making, fetters of iron without weight. Then I inquired of the angel of peace who proceeded with me, saying, For whom are these fetters and instruments prepared? He replied, These are prepared for the hosts of Azazel. Speaking of,
Right.
that they may be delivered over and adjudged to the lowest condemnation, and that their angels may be overwhelmed with hurled stones, as the Lord of spirits has commanded. Michael and Gabriel, Raphael and Phanuel shall be strengthened in that day, and shall then cast them into a furnace of blazing fire, and the Lord of spirits may be avenged of them for their crimes, because they became ministers of Satan and seduced those who dwell upon the earth. In those days shall punishment go forth from the Lord of spirits, and the receptacles of water which are above the heavens shall be opened. The fountains likewise which are under the heavens and under the earth, all the waters which are in the heavens and above them shall be mixed together. The water which is above heaven shall be the agent, and the water which is under the earth shall be the recipient. And all shall be destroyed who dwell upon earth and who dwell under the extremities of heaven. By these means shall they understand the iniquity which they have committed on earth, and by these means shall they perish.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We were just talking about these things. Right?
Didn't plan that, but that's pretty wild.
54. And I looked and turned to another part of the earth and saw there a deep valley with burning fire. And they brought the kings and the mighty and began to cast them into this deep valley. And there mine eyes saw how they made these their instruments, iron chains of immeasurable weight. And I asked the angel of peace who went with me, saying, For whom are these chains being prepared? And he said unto me, These are being prepared for the hosts of Azazel, so that they may take them and cast them into the abyss of complete condemnation. And they shall cover their jaws with rough stones, as the Lord of spirits commanded. And Michael and Gabriel and Raphael and Phanuel shall take hold of them on that great day, and cast them on that day into the burning furnace, that the Lord of spirits may take vengeance on them for their unrighteousness in becoming subject to Satan, and leading astray those who dwell on the earth. And in those days shall punishment come from the Lord of spirits, and he will open all the chambers of waters which are above the heavens, and of the fountains which are beneath the earth, and all the waters shall be joined with the waters. That which is above the heavens is the masculine, and the water which is beneath the earth is the feminine, and they shall destroy all who dwell on the earth and those who dwell under the ends of the heaven. And when they have recognized their unrighteousness which they have wrought on the earth, then by these shall they perish.
Now, as I understand the way the Book of Enoch is compiled, it's a series of books that have been compiled into one. And so in the Charles here, it says it has a division here saying this is the Noahic fragment of the first world judgment. So this is that part of the Book of Enoch, as it's separated into parables and different things that is dealing with the Noah judgment. And boy, I don't know about you, but that sure does sound like enclosed world cosmology to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, again, which we'll get to that vision at the end of the book on the courses of heavenly luminaries, where he
Chapter 8
talks,
and 9.
About the lofty roof and all that.
Yeah. Let me see if I can pull it up here. It was passages like this that made me create what I call the Yahuwah terrarium.
Right.
Let me bring this over here. If people go to testingtheglobe.com, and in the top menu, they could click under more resources and then click on Enoch's domed world. And if you click on that, this was my 2015 brain dump on as I'm going through the Book of Enoch, going, whoa, Enoch is a slam dunk for flat earthers.
Right.
And just going through and of course we have the Logos Bible software, depiction of the ancient Hebrew conception of the universe. And so, I'm looking at these texts and look, this is not thus saith the Lord, this is thus thinketh Rob, this is just my, as an artist, my conception of what I'm seeing in the scriptures and what I came up with. And I had depicted on the cutaway where I sort of open up the box to look inside of it. I created these boxes that I imagined as the storehouses of the deep, because if you have waters above the heavens opening up, the 7 torrents of water that we see in, I think it's Enoch 89, being opened up and filling the enclosure. It says like 4 or 5 times in that one text that the water filled the enclosure. And we just saw it in the text we just read, that the waters above came down and mixed. I mean, there's no way to make that sound like a globe. You just can't. But I was wondering, okay, so if the water from above came and filled the enclosure, where then did the water go when the waters receded? And so I had this idea, because you read elsewhere about the storehouses of the deep. Mm-hmm, right. So I made these like boxes inside the walls of the box here, that I imagined the waters from the flood going into the storehouses. Now they could have gone, if they went back and maybe filled back up, because David talked about the waters that be above the heavens in his day. And, that's quite, probably 1,000 or more years after the flood. He's talking about waters that be above the heavens.
Right.
And of course, we see this sea of glass and all that stuff in the Book of Revelation and whatnot. So he's on the waters and what have you. Either way, that passage that we just read certainly is a slam dunk, and talking about the waters above mixing with the waters beneath.
Right. Yeah, and that's
in a bathtub.
Again, yeah, exactly, and that's how it became filled, so that all the waters then topped over all of the all the mountains, and we see that in the snow globe, how all the waters are. It was that same kind of thing during that time, and then when the fountains of the deep were opened and the water drained out, and then the levels receded. But yeah, it only, in my opinion, works in that enclosed type world system, and then especially with the way that it's described in the Book of Enoch. I mean, no doubt.
And I pointed out a while back, my friend Peter, who speaks Greek fluently, looking at the Septuagint, is like, King Jimmy says floodgates of heaven, but in Greek, it's talking about the waterfall of heaven. Like he described it like a Hoover Dam. That a Greek-speaking person heard the words. It was talking about the floodgates of heaven. Literally like this. Imagine Hoover Dam on steroids.
Right.
There's no way you can make that rain from fluffy clouds. Put it that way.
Right.
It's the windows of heaven. Windows are in a solid structure. There's no way around it.
Right. And can you imagine how much water would have to enter?
And the pressure of that water coming down?
Oh, no doubt. My goodness. You talk about changes to the topography, and then all the animals, and then all the mud, and all the everything being just mixed up and tousled together. Yeah.
Well, go figure. When God wants to make a judgment,
right.
He's going to be thorough.
Yes, unforgettable.
In wiping everything out and stirring it all up. To the credit of Creation Ministries, even though I'm really frustrated with them as far as what they're picking and choosing, what they're going to be quote unquote literal about, they do a good job of showing how why we have the different sedimentary levels and the different fossils that we find in them. Well, it just makes sense. If you've got a washing machine sifting dirt around, the bigger, heavier objects are going to be on the bottom, and the lighter ones are going to be on top. And stuff that's already aquatic is going to already be on the bottom. So really, a worldwide flood is the only explanation for the fossil record. The fact that we have a fossil record is testimony to the Great Flood.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have the shells of oceanic creatures on the tops of like the Himalayan mountains.
Whales even.
Yeah. So how do you explain all that?
Yeah. We got
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Yeah, we're not gonna be able to get into the next chapter.
Yeah. Oh, why don't you just tell people about how you're gonna put together in the graphic novels your seed series?
Yeah. Cool. Thanks. Basically, every television script is divided up into a teaser in 5 acts. The 5 acts are interrupted by your commercial breaks. Of course, streaming online, you're not going to have commercials, but you still write the script as if you're going to have commercial breaks. So what I realize is that the page count for typically a 45 to 47 minutes, we would call hour-long episodic that has commercials in it. You typically have each act is going to be roughly 7 to 8 pages-ish of television script. But that translates to about 30 pages of comic book.
Awesome.
So basically, for every television script, I get 6 products. You get the teaser and 5 acts for each individual comic book. So we're about halfway through the second one right now, issue number 2, which would be Act 1 of the television script. And when we finish Act 5, we'll have 6 completed comic books that will then package together into one graphic novel. So we ultimately end up with 7 comic book products from each individual television script. So I told my comic book artists, I'm like, are you guys happy? They're like, yeah, we're real happy. I'm like, are you happy? I'm like, I'm jacked out of my mind happy. I'm so happy with you guys. So if you're happy and I'm happy, we're going to be busy for a long time, because I've got 4 published scripts, several that are not published yet. But I mean, that's enough to keep us busy for a long time.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it'll get the word out, and bring people opportunity to check it out in advance of actually being a TV publication. So, all right, brother. Hey, we appreciate you. Thanks, everybody, for joining in and listening.
Thanks, man. Thanks, everybody.
God bless all. Good night.
Night.
Shalom.
Sacred Word Revealed comes to Atlanta, Georgia on March 27th through 29th, 2020. Purposed to reveal end times mysteries, to prepare the final generation, we must don the full armor of God. Featuring Zen Garcia, Gary Wayne, Stephen and Yana Ben-Nun, Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, Justin James Garcia, Dr. Joy Pugh, Rob Skiba, Laurel Austin, buy your tickets now at sacredwordrevealed.com.